You are now watching Believe. Do you believe?
We've got Tori McElhaney, the beat reporter for AtlantaFalcons.com, the co-host of Falcons Final Whistle, and a sad BTS fan. Tori, you survived minicamp. How you doing?
Oh, I am so glad that third point made it in because honestly, I was here. I don't know if people follow me on Twitter, but if you did, you saw the immediate reaction almost to the BTS going on a hiatus news. Granted, now we know it's just like they're just doing more solo stuff. So now I have 7 schedules to keep up with instead of 1 for the group. But I was distraught on the first day of minicamp. I wrote so many notes and we learned so much for minicamp, but I was barely there because I was just very upset about BTS going on a hiatus. So thank you for the support during this very, very tough time for me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, as you probably don't know this, but in my time since covering the Falcons, I've moved to South Korea. I have become a full-time BTS beat reporter, although they only call them BT reporters. So
yeah.
I'm just letting you know, it's not forever. It's not permanent. Hang in there, Tori.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Anyone and everyone who would like to send me a Venmo request for coffee, that's the payment of which I need during this very sad time.
The hottest coffee for the hottest time of the year.
Exactly.
You're going to regret that. But we are here to talk about a really, just brutal minicamp weather-wise.
Oh
And
my
so,
gosh.
like, I'm curious. I'm curious, just how you're handling that, how everybody was handling that. I know that people got called out for standing in the shade.
Oh yeah.
We're not a heat abuse supportive podcast here personally. Everybody stay inside, stay hydrated. But short minicamp, it's a short minicamp when there's, less days of practice than there are syllables in the actual word. But where do you want to start, Tori? What was kind of your big takeaway from the last 2 days?
Oh man, other than it was roasting on Thursday or on Wednesday. Yeah, today's Thursday. Wednesday, it was roasting. I don't know, like you've been out there for mini camp and training camp before, and it's always hot. We're in Flowery Branch, Georgia in the middle of the summer. It is hot. But for some reason, Wednesday was brutal. It was like the heat index was up to like 110, 111, like on the field. It was tough. And it's funny because the very first time that we talked to Drake London back in like May when we were going through rookie mini camp, he said then, he was like, man, it's hot down here. And that day it wasn't even 80 degrees. And I was standing there with a jacket on and I'm like, oh, sweetie, just wait. And exactly a month later, we are standing out there just roasting. The funniest thing was we got called out by Dean Pease, Arthur Smith, and then Eric Harris specifically called Scott Bair out by name. He was like, dude, like you're in the shade, like get out here. We're trying to build a culture here, my guy. And those are basically his words exactly. So, but beside the point, beside it being super hot and just melting for 2 hours, it was just really good to see this group together, even though we didn't see some key pieces there. Cordero Patterson mainly. He was here in Flowery Branch, but Arthur Smith made the comment. He was like, I'm not going to rev him up for 2 days when we're going to need him during the season, especially for someone who's had a career as long as his. So it was just good to see these guys out there. They're not running at 100%. I think that's a misconception of mini camp is that, oh, it's like training camp, and it's not. Like they're not wearing like the full pads, and they're not going 110%. You're seeing a lot of 7-on-7 work, and that's basically it. But it was still good to kind of just see these guys back together again, and honestly to see how this group, honestly, from my perspective, really likes each other. Like that may sound super weird, but they just seem like they all have such a good relationship with each other. And that was not something that I was expecting was going to happen when you have so many like transplant players that are kind of all converging in into the Flowery Branch facility. It's very, very interesting.
Well, sometimes that can be a net positive, just having a lot of an influx of new blood, new players, new mentalities, new energies. That's something that I kind of really felt that the Falcons got away from in a bad way towards the end of Dan Quinn and Thomas Dimitroff's run. It was a lot of the same guys running it back, and all of the battle scars were kind of building up. And then you saw
Yeah.
how it ended. But even that 2015, 2016, like they were bringing in a lot of new players, a lot of new guys who needed to compete, who were kind of trying to prove themselves. And that's kind of what it seems like the tone was for 2 days here at minicamp. I mean, you wrote about it really well, your minicamp recaps on AtlantaFalcons.com, but just kind of the AJ Terrell and Kyle Pitts of it all, them going back and forth, jawing, seemed emblematic of a higher level of outward competition, for lack of a better phrase, from the players. Is that something that is real? Or do you think that, because I mean, we kind of see that all the time, and at this time of year, it is a little bit more of a glorified 7-on-7. Players can be a little bit more schoolyard, but do you get the sense that this is real and this is an identity kind of that we should track with this team?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And it's funny that you were talking about going back to the 15 and 16 years. We were talking to Grady Jarrett the very first day of mini camp, and he made the comment that has stuck with me since, where he said that he felt like this team was as close as any team that he's played with in Atlanta. That was wild to me, but you do see it in a way that I don't know if I've seen it with this Falcons organization in years at this point. Like you talk about the AJ Terrell, Kyle Pitts example. It was so great. And it was something that I honestly wrote a lot about. And so I'm going to reiterate that. But we were talking to Casey Hayward after practice on Wednesday, and he said Kyle and AJ were kind of going at it before we even hit the field. And then they get out there and you just hear the DBs just giving Kyle up and down the road. Like, don't let 8 in the end zone. Like, let's keep 8 out of the end zone, blah, blah, blah. And then Kyle, of course, catches a quote unquote touchdown in 7-on-7 and tosses the ball up in the air in front of the DBs. But it's like, it's that kind of stuff that is so fun to watch, especially with these young guys like AJ Terrell and Kyle Pitts, who are kind of the faces of the organization at this point in time.
100%.
I mean, these are AJ Terrell and Kyle Pitts are the two guys that you really feel confident that Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith are going to want to build around in the future. And so these are kind of your cornerstones, and seeing them kind of get into this type of spirit just with each other is really great. And we were talking to Kyle after minicamp wrapped up, and he said, AJ and I go against each other multiple times a day, and I make him better, he makes me better. And to have those two guys be the cornerstone of kind of where the Falcons organization is right now as two of the most, in my opinion, exciting young players at their position in the league, it's really good to see. And I try and tell people, it's like, that's what you need to lean in on this year is that aspect of this team and where it goes. Like, try and think more big picture about how Kyle Pitts and AJ Terrell are going to continue to be an important part of this organization in 2024, 2025, et cetera, et cetera. Let's think a little bit more big picture than just being like, oh my gosh, like, we don't know who anyone on the team is anymore, and this is going to be a tough season. All that may be true. And, you take that as it comes, but know that there still are guys around here who do want to see this transition into something. I think AJ Terrell said it best when he was on our podcast. He was like, I asked him, I was like, what's one word to describe 2022? And he said a marathon. And I was like, sometimes when you hear somebody say something, you're like, that's perfect. Like, that's going to be my lead in like every story that I write. But he said that, and I thought it was so great because I think he understands, like, this is a process of an organization. This isn't a dead sprint in 2022. That's not how they're playing this. They're playing this like a marathon.
Yeah, I mean, the Rams last year were in a dead sprint. Everything they did last year was to win a Super Bowl. The Falcons, this is a season of answers. You've got a lot of questions. You need to figure out who are going to be your answers. And one of the things that I love about the AJ Terrell and Kyle Pitts kind of matchup, especially, not that they're two former first-round picks or whatever, but the number of times that we got asked over the years, or not that we got asked, that we asked kind of the corners on this team, guys that they would bring in, free agents, draft picks, all that stuff. How does going against Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley in practice every day make you better?
Mhm.
Julio Jones didn't really do anything in minicamp, not in like 7-on-7 or 11-on-11 drills. Calvin Ridley, kind of did, but it's different when you're getting truly iron sharpening iron in AJ Terrell, who was a top 3 corner in the NFL last season, and Kyle
Yeah.
Pitts, who set all-time rookie tight end records. Like, that is true best on best. And so I think that those two guys setting the tempo, it seems, is very impressive. But one of the key storylines, I think, coming out of minicamp, not that I almost even hesitate like making a whole big hullabaloo about like OTAs and minicamp, because, like you said, they're running around in shorts and t-shirts. Yeah, it's like we're not getting anything. But when Arthur Smith says that Desmond Ridder is light years ahead of most young quarterbacks in terms of playing from the neck up, like that's as much of a headline as you could hope to get out of a minicamp practice. So what were your thoughts when he said that? I say that on the one hand because that's important, but then he also kind of added a little bit earlier, you're hoping the physical things you see at times catch up. And so that seems to be the dichotomy. Certainly him being ahead of the curve mentally is a big positive, but how do you stack that with what you've seen from him physically on the field?
Yeah, I thought that compliment spoke volumes about Desmond Ridder's football IQ, for one, but also Arthur Smith is very cognizant of what he says to the media. And to pay a compliment like that to Desmond Ridder, I felt like that should have been talked about a whole lot, because that's not something that happens every day, that Arthur Smith pays someone that type of compliment. And to be completely honest, talking to Desmond Ridder, you can feel that confidence that Arthur Smith was kind of talking about in terms of his football IQ. We were talking to him I think it was the first day of camp, and someone asked him what was the difference? Like what's something that he thought would be different making the jump to the league? And he said, he was like, I thought it'd be more difficult to get the scheme. He was like,
what an answer.
What an answer, right? Like, he was like, I thought that it was going to be a lot harder to like understand the scheme and get the install in and everything. But he was like, but I feel pretty good about where I'm at. And I feel like I understand this really well. And for a rookie like Desmond Ridder, who's a number 74 overall pick, to say that, I thought was just as important to hear as Arthur Smith kind of reiterating that he feels that way about Desmond Ridder. And someone asked like why he felt that way, or what Desmond shows that like makes it seem that he is light years ahead. And he said he commands the huddle. And we saw that in rookie minicamp. We saw Drake London, Tyler Algier, John Fitzpatrick all say glowing things about Desmond Ridder leading this team and being a very vocal leader and always kind of knowing what's next and what to do. And that's what you ask for in the captain of your offense. Now, does that mean Desmond Ridder is going to be the starter day one of the season? No, absolutely not. Like, I think that is, it's really funny because I'm like, okay, his football IQ is there, and it's great that we're saying that on what is today, June 16th. But there, like what Arthur Smith said, that's from the neck up. There is a lot more connection that needs to be made in terms of like the physical aspect of it, making sure that he's connecting on the timing with receivers, all of that. And so I know with minicamp, like we don't necessarily know in 7-on-7 what they're asking Desmond Ridder to do versus what they're asking Marcus Mariota to do. So I think a lot of times, like when you are like counting like, oh, like Desmond went 1 for 4 in this like one period, it's like, and Marcus Mariota went 3 for 4. It's like, we don't necessarily know what they were being asked to do. We don't necessarily know what the defense was being asked to do in those moments. But I say all of that to say, like, there's still a long way for Desmond Ridder to go. But the fact that the football IQ part of it and the install part of it is there, I think is so important, because we are so early in this that it's almost like I would rather, and maybe this is just me, but like I would almost rather someone be like there with the football IQ and have the physical part of it catch up than the other way around. Because, and this is something that I said in our podcast, but I was like, my dad used to always say, like, Tori, you're never going to like out athlete anybody, but you can outsmart a lot of people. And that's literally how I lived my playing days life. Like back in the day when I was actually playing, and even kind of sometimes still covering the game.
Just
But it's
savvy.
like, just savvy, just smart, just making sure you're at the right place at the right time and not messing up. And so the fact that like Desmond, to bring it all back, the fact that Desmond has that right now and they feel confident that he has that right now, I think is a really, really good spot for him to be in.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything you said is exactly spot on. And I mean, I would even, the flip side of this, right, is Michael Vick, right? Like somebody who came out and said, I did not do the little things, the stuff upstairs, mentally, learning the playbook, all that stuff. He relied a lot on his athleticism. Now his athleticism is elite of the elite of the elite. Like, so he could get away with that. But Desmond Ridder's no slouch either. All of this, though, seems like what you would expect from somebody who was a 4-year starter at Cincinnati, took them to the college football playoff, like coming in, commanding the huddle. He's got those reps. He's got that confidence. It was some of the stuff in Scott Bair's piece about him and Drake London both working with Jordan Palmer, and kind of, I think they use poker chips to visualize the way the schemes, all of that stuff, him talking into a microphone and listening it back to get kind of the sense of the cadence of his rhythm and hearing it through the helmet. All that stuff is awesome. Those are little tips and tricks that I think young players are getting much better about because of their access to technology, access to different ideas. All of that stuff is very true. But some of the things that I read that almost would seem like negatives for Desmond Ridder were actually, to me, big positives. And specifically kind of in some of the breakdowns where they would say Desmond Ridder went like 1 for 4 in a 7-on-7 period. I think it was Michael Rothstein's, like his Twitter notes, but that he was pushing the ball down the field. He was trying to fit it in at some intermediate, deeper windows, whereas Marcus Mariota could have gone 4 for 5, but a lot of those may have been shorter, shallower routes. This is the time to be getting a sense of what you can and can't do in this scheme with the talents that you have at your disposal. It's something Matt Ryan would do a lot. Is he'd always kind of get joked on a little bit for throwing a pick or doing stuff, but it's like he's trying to push this ball down the field to see where the pressure points are in this defense, to see what's possible in this offense before it's actually go time. So to me, that's actually the thing about Desmond Ridder that I read the last couple of days that actually caught my attention in the best possible way is, all right, this guy's trying to make himself into somebody who's not just some answer, but like the answer, somebody who can really elevate an offense instead of maybe just playing within the confines of that offense. And so if he can master it, there's a lot of stuff that has to come next. Obviously, how to read defenses. It's one thing to just know your playbook, but then when other guys are trying to stop you from doing what you want, like that's all going to have to come with experience. But it seems like Desmond Ridder is on a great track. But quickly, what did Marcus Mariota look like? How did the presumed starter look like? We're sitting here talking about the rookie. How did Marcus Mariota look out there?
Yeah, it's funny because I joke all the time. I'm like, we're going to be talking about quarterbacks for the next few years. Like, I'm just getting it through my system that we're just going to keep talking about it forever. And we should, because it's important.
Good content.
But yes, the content's going to be great. But no, Marcus. So far, Marcus is so interesting. And I think that he's a guy, we talk about how much like the fellow rookies like really like Desmond Ridder. And I think other people like Desmond Ridder too. But like, with Marcus, I feel like he just kind of carries himself in a way that makes you feel good about his ability, like to command as well. But I feel like he commands differently than Desmond does. I feel like Desmond's probably very vocal, and not that Marcus isn't, but Marcus is a little bit more soft-spoken. But he's just like an all-around good guy that I think people just want to go to bat for. Like, I think you see that with things that Arthur Smith says about Marcus Mariota and how much fun he says that he's having being back with Marcus because he respects him as a player and what he's been through as a player. With Marcus, it's very interesting because I think it's very obvious that he has there's a comfort there in the scheme when we're watching him kind of make his reads and do different things in quote unquote live periods. Something that he talked about a lot was how he felt like Arthur Smith in this scheme, he's trying to get to the point where he can play a bit more free. He's like, sometimes I kind of get mechanical in my reads and trying to just go 1, 2, 3, 4 and like that's it and that's what needs to happen. it's getting to the point with Marcus where he feels comfortable that he can kind of just do things on the fly, and then it makes sense, and understanding why, you're doing things and what Arthur Smith is asking you to do. That's kind of what goes into all of this. And I think it's the same exact thing for Desmond Ridder. It's like they're trying to get to the point where it's like they understand the why of what they're doing. And so they can go out. And this was something that Charles London, the quarterback's coach, actually talked about a couple weeks ago, where he was like, these two quarterbacks, regardless of who we're talking about, have to be able to go out onto the field and save themselves. There's going to be times where like we're not out, as coaches, we're not out on the field with them. They have to save themselves. That is something that Matt Ryan, I feel like, does better than almost anyone. He knows how to save himself in a situation, in a play call.
In non-obvious ways. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. And in his command of the offense, etc. But it's now getting these guys to be able to do that in their own way, not in Matt Ryan's way, in Marcus Mariota's way. And so I think it's going to be a really good challenge to see what happens, particularly with Marcus. And I feel pretty good about where they are in terms of the install process. I think that's we're at a good stopping point as we have this like 5-6 week break before training camp starts. We'll also like obviously know more once training camp gets here, and we do get to see a lot, like guys getting closer to running things at 100%. It'll also be interesting to see how much we see of like Marcus and Desmond in preseason games. That's something that I feel like no one's talking about, because we didn't see Matt Ryan at all last year for obvious reasons. It's Matt Ryan. He does not need to play in the preseason. But now you have Marcus coming in, who's been a backup for a couple of years. You have a rookie in Desmond. Like, what are we going to do in the preseason? Like, you're not going to sit. You only have 2 of them right now. You're not going to sit both of them or one of them. Like, you need to see Marcus as much as you need to see Desmond.
Yeah, I mean, I would expect both of them to, not probably a true 50-50, but it wouldn't surprise me if, they give kind of Marcus most of the all of the first quarter, most of the second quarter, then see what Desmond Ridder can do in like a 4-minute drill before halftime, then give him that halftime, then let him come out for the second half. And then, they may sign kind of a pseudo third string quarterback at some point to just give him that fourth quarter. And then I would flip that. And I would go second game, start Desmond, then give Marcus that 4-minute drill, then let him come out, like do all of that stuff. But again, to shout out Scott here, I thought he kind of describes that notion that you were describing about Arthur Smith wanting Marcus Mariota to kind of play freer a little bit. And Scott kind of likened that to knowing the sheet music, but then playing jazz, right? Like knowing the notes and knowing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 reads, but kind of just having that in the back of your mind and muscle memorying it, and then knowing where ultimately everything is supposed to go. But how you get there can be a little bit different. And so, I mean, I think that Marcus Mariota is again, like cool, calm, and collected. I'm not really worried about him. It really is just kind of how quickly is Desmond Ridder going to make things interesting, I think is the storyline in training camp. But what about the guys in front of him protecting him? Obviously, offensive line is just like the worst thing to possibly evaluate at minicamp. Like offensive and defensive line, they might as well not even be out there, because it's so weird. But knowing all of that, I just want to ask how the energy was between, Drew Dalman, Matt Hennessy, and Jalen Mayfield. Obviously, those guys are all kind of really coming in critical points of their career. It's a little bit of a now or never feel for those 3 guys. So what were they like energy-wise out there on the field?
Yeah, it was funny because in Arthur's last press conference, I asked him, I was like, we've seen Matt Hennessy and Drew Dalman kind of sharing reps with the quote unquote first team offensive line, which is the team that has Jake Matthews and Chris Lindstrom on it, because those 2 you're not worried about. And Caleb McGarry's in there too. And so I will say that as well. So it's like, okay, what are you looking for with these guys? Like, how much of this can you actually evaluate with them when you're not going live? No one's really hitting anybody. Like, you're going maybe half speed, and half speed's being generous, like with these guys. And Arthur was very like honest. He was like, a lot of the things that we're asking of them comes in the classroom. And we are really trying to make sure that their work in the classroom, it's like almost like classroom greater than field, like for the offensive and defensive lines right now. And I will say that he said there's like a good companionship, like camaraderie, even between Matt Hennessy and Drew Dahlman as they're kind of like fighting it out for this starting center spot, because I think we saw for like a couple games last year where they tried to switch out Drew Dahlman and Matt Hennessy through games. Like it was like Drew would get 2 series and then Matt Hennessy would get 2 series. And it's like, I understand like why you would want to do that, but it's like for the center position, that just does not compute. It does not work. It's just not going to happen. And I think now is the time to have that happen. And so I'm really, really looking forward to seeing how this continues to progress in training camp, because it's like, okay, we got through mini camp. You feel good about how, like where they are in the classroom and in terms of understanding their role in the offense, et cetera. What can they do physically? Who is the best physical center that you need to do what needs to be done? And then as far as like Jalen Mayfield, we also talked to Jalen Mayfield recently, and I think he was very people. I think we all know like his rookie year was not. It
was the definition of taking your lumps.
Yes, very much so. Definition of trial by fire, all of that kind of stuff. And we've talked a lot to Arthur Smith in recent months about like how he just doesn't blame Jalen Mayfield or like Richie Grant for quote unquote people saying that they had bad rookie years, because he was like, that wasn't the vision. He was like, we weren't wanting to give Richie Grant so many different things to have to understand in the defense. We needed to give him one position that he could go in and do all the time, not 3 different positions, not asking him to do so many things as a rookie. And then you have Jalen Mayfield who goes in day one as the starting left guard. And it's like, that was not necessarily the plan. And so now it's like talking to Jalen Mayfield, he very much is very like, I understand that last year was not good. Like, and he's very much like, I want to get better. I want to make sure that I can play for a full season and play to a consistent caliber. And so I think that the group in and of itself knows that it has to take a step in the right direction, not just as a group, but as individuals as well. And I will say this, I know talking about like offensive line is not like the sexiest topic in the world, but I will say I think I'm the most looking forward to seeing this position group in training camp more than any other, because I think that's how significant the competition is going to be with that group. And I fully believe that the Falcons are going to bring in more linemen to push these guys through training camp. So I think it's like, let's just get to training camp and then we will see how this offensive line operates, because as of right now, it's just kind of like the learnings of it. It's not necessarily like the physicality of it, but Arthur Smith wants like nasty, tough, smart linemen. It's like, who are those 5 and how do you get to week 1 with them?
Imagine if a coach just came out and was like, no, we want some really light-footed, nice, kind of average IQ guys out there.
Yeah. We want them to go, like, we want to go get ice cream with those guys, which I honestly think I could go get ice cream with every single one of them and be completely happy. But it's like, let's see you run through somebody. Like, let's go, let's do some nastiness.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, your answer there was perfect. It's really just, there's not much to glean from the offensive line at this point. But I did think it was always telling that they didn't really invest like a 1A or even a 1B type of capital in an offensive lineman this offseason, which always spoke to their plan was probably not a 1-year thing. And same for Richie. Like, I look at it more as adjustment periods than year ones. Like that, it was a redshirt year for both of those guys in different ways. Because I think offensive linemen, they need to take their lumps in some ways. But what about
if you remember? I was just going to say, like, you remember, like, Dan Quinn would say all the time, the position that makes the biggest jump from year 1 to year 2 is offensive lineman every time.
Yeah.
He said that so many times, and I 100% believe that. Like, I really do, because I feel like that position is super, it's like almost mysterious. Like, I feel like no one actually understands like what goes into being an offensive lineman in this league.
Well, I remember, I mean, Thomas would always say that kind of just the way the gap between the way that offensive lines were coached at the collegiate level and what they are asked to do at the NFL level was bigger than pretty much anywhere on the field. And so
Yeah.
that was part of the learning experience. It's just that what you're being taught is kind of different. And so now you have to figure it out against bigger, faster, stronger, smarter competition. And it's like,
Yep.
all right, yeah, we need to invest a little bit of time in these guys. So somebody who it seems like the Falcons are investing some, time into and some different time is Feleipe Franks. I mean, is this like a little bit of a mini camp heat mirage that he was doing out there, or is this something that will have legs, I think, this fall? And could he be part of the Falcons packages on offense?
I mean, I kind of think so. I think Arthur Smith really likes Feleipe as like an athlete. And it's
Yeah.
funny too, because we were walking around the other day, and we were walking out to practice, and I saw Kyle Pitts and Feleipe Franks kind of walking together. And it's like, you forget that Feleipe has the build that he does, and that
Yeah,
he
he's
is
huge.
as tall and long as he is. And it's like, then you see him out there with like standing next to Kyle, and you're like, it makes sense. Like, it's like,
Hmm.
okay, Arthur Smith, we see the method to the madness here. And do I think like that he's going to completely like transition to tight end? Not sure. We didn't see him at all like as a quarterback this past like mini camp. And Arthur Smith made a good point where he was like, we only wanted to, you could have gone out and gotten a quote unquote fourth quarterback for mini camp, and tried
Right.
some different guys
But
out.
why
But he
take
was like,
reps away from the guys you need?
exactly. And that's what he said. And I think that kind of coincides with making sure that Feleipe got reps, but got them at tight end. And it's funny too, because I remember when we had the open practice a couple weeks ago at Mercedes-Benz, there were a couple of tweets where people were talking about like Feleipe's lining up outside, like, and it was like a really, really big deal on Twitter. And I remember looking at it, and I was like, what are y'all, this has been happening. This happened last year. What are we doing here? And I think it's just like the level of reps has increased for Feleipe through like this OTA period than it was last year. I think last year it was more just like a fun, like, oh, like Felipe's not wearing a red jersey, like he's playing
Yeah,
tight
yeah.
end, like let's see. And now it's almost kind of like this is a real thing that's happening. And I will say this, Felipe's got some good hands. I will say that he has made a couple of really good catches, contested catches in traffic, that I've been like, you know what? Like, that's interesting. And it does make me wonder like how serious they are about like, are we going to see packages with Feleipe? Like, not just like, let's run him out there one time, but like multiple times in a series. I'll be very, very interested to know that once we get to like, I don't know, week 4 of the season.
At the very least, I mean, it gives the Falcons offense another wrinkle that defenses would have to prepare for. So there's like some inherent advantage there, but I cannot believe that you just insinuated that people overreact to things on Twitter. I mean, how dare you?
I'm the worst. As someone who like is like a part, literally just opened the podcast talking about how distraught I was about BTS going on a hiatus. No, I would never call out people for being overly dramatic.
Good. Glad we cleared that up.
Yeah.
But speaking of over dramatic on Twitter, Olamide Zaccheaus, seems
Oh
like
my gosh.
you
Yes.
think that either A, you're extremely high on him and you're just kind of passing it off, you're deflecting to the coaching staff, or do you really think that the coaching staff is this enamored, or not enamored because, he's probably your third receiver, but like that they really like what Olamide Zaccheaus can bring to this team?
They do. They do. I swear that Arthur Smith would not say that he likes, like specifically call out like unprompted that he likes a guy if he didn't. Like, that's the thing. Arthur Smith is so like no nonsense that it's not him saying that he likes coaching Olamide Zaccheaus. I think people should really listen to that. And I know like sometimes he's like, I don't discriminate on like receivers under
On
6 foot.
size.
And
Yeah.
yeah. And that was funny, and talking about like OZ being 5'8". But for real, they really do like OZ, and it's really interesting seeing him, when they're doing their individual drills, and the first receiver up every single time is OZ. And seeing kind of him take on a leadership role is very interesting. I said this on Twitter, but like I don't see, people were kind of giving me a hard time because I said, like, when you are looking at the 5, maybe 6 receivers that you take to your 53-man roster, I said there are 3 locks, and I said Drake London, Bryan Edwards, and OZ. And people are like, OZ's a lock? And I'm like, yes, like he absolutely is. He's a different type of receiver in terms of body build and also skill set. And I think like they really appreciated what he did in 2021 when you didn't have Calvin, and for a time you didn't have Russell Gage. So yes, I'm very hyped about OZ, and I think the coaching staff is too. And yeah, I mean, that's it. Like, I don't have anything else to say because, like, I just believe that OZ is like going to be a part of this offense.
I'm gonna be really curious to see just kind of come training camp the routes and stuff they have him running, because up until now he's been primarily a deeper threat guy, like those post routes, all of that stuff. But can he mold into that Tajay Sharp type of player that Arthur Smith has? He usually does have one of those guys. But they are a little more intermediate short route guys, and then they catch the ball, take it after the catch. That's not Olamide's MO, but maybe they can mold him into that type of player. 2 more before I let you go. What have you seen from the early draft picks? We haven't even talked about Drake London or Arnold Ebiketie yet. I mean, where was Drake London in the wide receiver line?
No, I know. It was funny because sometimes he was last. Like sometimes he was
God.
Yeah. But I think it was just like sometimes it just like fell that way. But no, just talking about Drake London for a second, when we talked to him, it's funny because that these guys love to be like out on the field and everything like that. But I think people forget that Drake London hasn't been out on the field because of his injury. And when we were talking to him during rookie minicamp, he made the comment, he was like, man, I'm just excited to like just get on the grass again, like just to run around again. And he said it again in mandatory minicamp about how just happy he was just to be out there. And it's like, that's the energy that I appreciate. Like, you're just glad to be out there. And for your like number 8 pick to kind of just have that mentality, I think is really like a healthy mentality to have. But from a actual football perspective, he's big. Like, and he's I know that quote unquote analysis, Tori McElhaney, he's big. But he just looks good out there. And when he's lined up on like the opposite end of the offense from Kyle Pitts, you can see why the Falcons wanted Drake London. You can see why this is something that is going to be the building blocks for the offense moving forward. I think Drake is a very, very, I know there were a lot of people that were like, Drake was not the best wide receiver in the draft class, and yet he was the first wide receiver taken. He may not be your quote unquote best receiver, but he's the best receiver for this scheme. And I think that 100%. Is very, right? Like, I think that is very important to understand. He fits the mold of what Arthur Smith wants a receiver to be in this offense. And so I think you're seeing that. I think you're seeing how this is going to work. It may not work in 2022, but like 2024, I think this is going to work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest thing, right, is versatility, his ability to block. But I love, it must be so weird to be a top 10 pick and then not have been out there on the field for like a year and a half. But you're hearing people, you're watching highlights of yourself on SportsCenter. People are talking about you as a football player, and you're just like, I really would give anything just to be able to run in the backyard right now and catch football, or like get ready for this. That would be such a weird headspace to be in. I couldn't even imagine.
I know it is funny. And I know you also asked about the other rookies.
Arnold Ebiketie.
I'm just like talking to Arnold Ebiketie. Yeah. Ebiketie is very interesting. The thing with Ebiketie though is that and I don't know if this is just like a depth thing or what, but like when they were doing like full on 11 on 11 stuff, like they, put like the veteran guys on one field and they do the younger guys on another field. And for the most part, like Drake London's over there with Kyle Pitts and Marcus and et cetera, et cetera. And Arnold Ebiketie is on the other side. He's on the other field. And your quote unquote like edge rushers on the veteran field, it's Ade Ogundeji and Lorenzo Carter, which makes sense. If I'm putting money down right now, those are your two starters day one. So I'm really looking forward to when we do get to training camp, seeing Arnold Ebiketie kind of coming into that rotation, because right now, you're playing against each other. There's not like the rotation isn't really there all that much. And so I am curious to see how that rotation looks when you get to like when they're facing Jacksonville at the joint practices, and when we get into a real game scenario. I'm really looking forward to seeing, because I think the mechanics are there, and I think that he's somebody that they really like and feel like they can mold accordingly, but just haven't really seen a whole bunch from him yet.
Yeah, and I mean, that was even as a player on film, like he wasn't this player who was going to pop one play and then disappear the next. It was a consistent kind of every play he brought it. Some plays he would have a great move, get to the quarterback. Some plays he'd get lucky. The quarterback would kind of come to him, but like he was always in the right spot because he did that work. Right. And so I think that he'll be a player where it may not be that he draws rave reviews every single practice, but that was kind of like AJ Terrell as a rookie. And I'm not going to say that he's going to be the same type of, projection here, but it was just like, man, this kid's just good playing and play out. Now he may not flash, but that means something in this league. And I think Ade Ogundeji kind of fits that bill as well. Last one here is any under the radar guys who we have not talked about, who you have not talked about, who you just want to get off your chest and be like, oh, these guys who you don't really know that well, like you should know them.
Yeah. I really like Bryan Edwards. I like Bryan Edwards a lot. I think that he is, we talk about like fitting the mold of scheme. I think he's going to fit very well with this group. Something that I'm very interested to see happen over the course of the next few months as we get into training camp is which receivers this coaching staff values. Like what type of body type are they valuing? What type of skill set are they valuing? I'm very curious to see kind of how this group like dwindles down as we get closer and closer to the 53-man cuts. But what I will say is I don't think Bryan Edwards is going anywhere because, well, one, they trade for him. You go out and you get this guy. But I do think that he's made a couple plays where I'm like, okay, he's not going to be someone who's going to go out and have like hundreds of yards every single game. But I think that I trust him to make the plays when they count. And finding that in a receiver, I think, is very, very important. So I'm really jazzed up about Bryan Edwards. I've said this so many times ad nauseum. Like people are probably like, Tori, shut up about this. But like, I cannot wait to see the AJ Terrell, Casey Hayward pairing like in action.
Heck
on
yeah,
the
it's the summer of the secondary on this podcast, Tori. It's the summer of the secondary.
Okay. Thank goodness, because the secondary is like my favorite position group on the field right now. Like, we're going through minicamp, so I can't make any hot takes, but like if that's going to be I will stand that I think like one of the strongest position groups, bar none, is the secondary on this team. I'm very, very excited to see them in action. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else that I'm just going to, honestly, it's funny because Anthony Rush is, the biggest guy on this field. And it's funny because this
noted
is the guy
punt returner, Anthony Rush.
Right. Yeah. So it's funny because I'm like, he was somebody that they brought in just in the middle of last year. And now
he played well.
He played well. And then he goes on and he's side by side with Grady Jarrett all the time in minicamp. And I'm just like, who knew? Who knew that this was going to be the guy that was going to like be the not relief of Grady Jarrett because they play together, but I'm excited to see what Anthony Rush does kind of like in a full off season with the Falcons. So there's three.
No, that was great. I mean, that's perfect. And I think the Anthony Rush is notable because obviously like he's he's the epitome of somebody who came and earned a spot with this team, and now they clearly have plans. They want to give him a look, and he's the type of body that this roster had been missing. And if they can hit on him, then that's huge. But Tori, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for joining. Please let everybody know what you've got coming down the pipe.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I'm obviously going to take some vacation time because once training camp gets here, like we are going nonstop until the end of January. So, going to take some vacation, hang out with the fam. But in terms of work, there's still a lot that we're working on. Like I have 2 more rookie series stories that has kind of been my passion project over the course of the last 8 weeks, how the Falcons decided on X, Y, or Z rookie player in the draft. We've got Justin Schaefer and John Fitzpatrick coming up in the next 2 weeks. I'm very excited about those. We've got a mini-series podcast that we're going to be doing in the coming months that I'm really, really excited about. I can't say like much about it, but it's I'm very, very excited about it. Nice. So be on the lookout for that, like once we get closer to training camp. And then of course, just like follow along on Twitter, on Instagram at Tori_McElhaney. And yeah, I hope that we get to do this all over again when training camp gets here, because that's when the real talk starts.